Welcome to What's the Deal with Sam? Starring Sam Lilly. Join Sam as he discusses a wide variety of topics.
Bad mail.
Now
Thank
let's
you.
start the show.
Thank you. Today, on a very yellow episode of What's the Deal with Sam? What's the deal with saying that someone or something vanished into thin air? I mean, did it ever vanish into thick air? Why is it never that? I mean, are we to assume there's never any tension in the room? There's no tension in the air when they vanish? Because apparently when there's tension, the air is very thick. You could cut the tension with a knife, the tension that is in the air. But when people vanish, it's always into thin air. If there's tension, they can't vanish because the air is just too thick. Are you unable to actually vanish into thick air? And is it just kind of like a dice roll when you're in like the average viscosity of air? I don't know. Like, it seems like such a strange thing because it's like, you've never. The only times you ever really talk that much about unless you're like a meteorologist, the only times you're talking about like the density of the air is like, well, it's the air is thick with, like tension, maybe fog or smog or something. Maybe it's thick in terms of like humidity, maybe, but when it's thin, it's maybe like, I guess, maybe mountain climber, the air is thin. You always, very high likelihood to disappear in the mountains. Because apparently, when the air is thin, that's when the most vanishings happen. That's where you vanish into. And it's not like you just vanish, in a place that has thin air either. It's like you vanish into thin air. Which I guess the idea being like is it harder? Like, does the thickness of the air, like, you think if it was thicker stuff, like thicker air, it might be foggy or something, right? And it'd be easier to vanish into it. So when you vanish into thin air, it's like they were just here, and there's nothing, in the air that would block me from seeing them vanish. Yet somehow they have vanished. Even though the air is just the thinnest air, there's nothing that could have possibly stopped me from seeing them vanish. And yet, so they have. I don't know, I just thought it was strange that, whenever somebody vanishes, there's always thin air. It's always thin air. And in space, I don't know, like, apparently I don't know how there can be anything in space to see. Because in space, there is no air to vanish into. If you vanish in space, and no one is there to not see it, did it really happen? Do you make it disappear? These are questions that I cannot answer. I am but one man betwixt two yellow lights. And that concludes our yellow light special. Please, you don't have to do this, but like, look, I live on tips, so if you could, give me a tip, like, hey, stop being fat, it's bad for you. I'll be like, thanks, that's a great life tip you gave me. That is a tip. I will take basically any sort of tip. I mean, like, somebody's gonna bring it up. What about, like, just a tip? Like, dick, right? Like, just tip. I'd be like, you know what? Like I say, I live on tips. I'm not gonna turn away your tip. No tip turning. No tiptoeing away from turning tips down. But I'm tipsy, and, tip of the morning to you. How are episodes supposed to end? With the ground! What's the deal with Sam?